Hello, this is Daniel Mart back again. I'm an actor and filmmaker based out of South Florida, and for this video, I'm going to be discussing the top 15 movie collections that Criterion should release. So, the last video I did, I discussed the top 30 single movies that Criterion should release that they should add into the Criterion collection. For this one, we're going to do the top 15 collections. So, what do I mean by collections? Basically, in this case, I mean 2 or more movies in the same release, and that's what I mean by collections. And I don't mean it like in the Shaft type of way where it has Shaft and then as a bonus feature it has Shaft big score. I don't mean it like that where the extra movies or special features. No, I mean this in the sense that all the movies are being released with the knowledge that they're all going to be released, like they're all in one singular feature, like the Lady Snowblood collection, for example, where you have both movies, or the Val Lewton collection where you have both movies, or even like right now, like the Wes Anderson collection that was just released, you have all the first 10 movies of Wes Anderson. That's what I mean, where they're all properly advertised as being as part of one collection, not as, again, a special feature, bonus feature to the main movie. So for this one, I have 15 different collections here, and some ground rules similar to the first video I did in regards to this. There are going to be some similar rules to this, although also some slight differences to this. The first rule I'm going to say is that this isn't going to be your traditional top 15 in this case where, oh, number 1 is this, number 2 is this, number 3 is this. I'm going to be saying this in terms of release order, and the way I decided to do release order is the first movie in every single collection, like the earliest one that was released in every single collection, that's how I'm going to determine. So, so if you have 2 different collections, one of them has a movie from 1955 and another one has a movie from 1954, the one from 1954 is going to go first, even, something like that, more or less, just to kind of keep some kind of organization. Furthermore, unlike the last video where I did this, where I had to watch every single movie, or I've already seen every single movie, since in this case I'm talking about collections, multiple movies. In this case, for the majority, with one exception, which we'll get to once we get to it, with one exception, I would have needed to see the majority of the movies in this series, with one exception, which we'll get to it once we get to it at that point. And again, for these collections, this is going to be a variety of different topics, whether the collection be because they're all from the same series, all from the same director, or they all have the same general theme or genre, if that makes sense. And on top of that, I'm also going to discuss some special features that they may or may not include, or should include, better said. But for this, I'm going to try to go a bit more quickly, given the fact that I do have a lot more stuff to discuss, a lot more movies to discuss in this case. So yeah, let's get on to the list, with the first collection being the first collection is going to be the Universal Monsters collection. I think that one is one of the most basic ones they should do. I'm actually kind of surprised they don't have any of the Universal Monsters on Criterion in any way, shape, or form. And for this, I'm just going to go with the classic lineup of Dracula from 1931, Frankenstein 1931, The Mummy 1932, The Wolfman 1941, Creature from the Black Lagoon 1954, and The Invisible Man from 1933. Okay, so I kind of got stuff out of order there. But yeah, I know a lot of people like to include Bride of Frankenstein in some of these things, but for this, I'm just going to keep it to the core, just the first movies of every single series in this case. I think the main reason they haven't done a Universal collection, or haven't even released any of the Universal Monsters in general, has to do with the fact that Universal themselves have already released a number of collections for these monsters. They have the 30 movie pack, where it has like the first 20 years of Universal Monsters, with like the first 30 movies they did, essentially. So they have that. They already have a collection of the first of all of these movies, plus Bride of Frankenstein included, and I have both of them somewhere here in the collection on top of that. So I think that's the main reason they haven't done this kind of collection, but I think it's just kind of odd that they haven't done any of the Universal Monster movies, even as a singular release. I mean, at least Dracula and Frankenstein would seem like the obvious ones right off the bat, and after that, maybe Invisible Man, maybe Wolfman. I think Creature and Mummy would probably get the short end of the stick in that case. But I feel like at least Dracula and Frankenstein should have gotten a Criterion release by this point. It seems kind of odd that they haven't. And then I think you can have a bunch of special features. Again, like these movies helped begin what essentially is horror, like modern day horror movies in a lot of sense, despite being from the 30s. So I think in a lot of sense, you can have a lot of documentaries as to how a lot of these films influenced current pop culture, especially Dracula, especially Frankenstein, especially Dracula in regards to Nosferatu, which was big, especially last year with Robert Eggers' movie of Nosferatu. I mean, Nosferatu in general is just a big thing, even in pop culture. Same thing with Frankenstein. You can do a lot of stuff here in that regards. The Mummy also has been blowing up in the past decade, especially. I mean, yes, you have Tom Cruise's The Mummy, but you also, even before that, you have Brendan Fraser's The Mummy. So I think you could also do a lot of great features with that. Creature of the Black Lagoon, you can also do something that ties into Shape of Water, honestly, which they do have in the collection. So I think that's something they could do a lot of stuff with. I think that'd be very informative because, in all fairness, those Universal collections, they don't really have the bonus features like that. They have a few bonus features, but it's nothing that's really that in-depth, in my opinion, whereas I think this is something where you can go in-depth, and I think they really would go in-depth with it. So that's the first collection I have here, just a general Universal Monsters movie collection. The second one I have here is basically, I have The Thing collection, the two movies, The Thing from Another World from 1951 and The Thing from 1982. If you want, I guess you could include the Thing prequel from 2011, I want to say. I don't really think it's needed here. I think the main reason they haven't done this collection is in part because there already is a collection with all three movies, Thing from Another World, The Thing, and Thing 1982 and The Thing from like 2010, 2011, which I also do have here some in my collection. I think that is a major contributing factor as to why they maybe haven't done this. But I think at the very least, I think from these two could get their own Criterion release. I think it's one of those things that's very similar to the Floating Weeds collection they could do, where you have the original and the remake in one package, and maybe just do it like that. And honestly, I feel like both of them would have some pretty good, decent special features. The Thing from 1982 would definitely have a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff in regards to the special effects and the makeup. I think that would be great. To be fair, that's the only one I've seen. I haven't seen The Thing from Another World, despite the fact that I have it. I probably should watch it, but I'm pretty sure there are special features there that you can include in regards to how the development of the movie and how it later went on to influence the 1982 version. I'm sure you can have some special features there, which I think would be great. Again, since I'm just more familiar with the 1982 thing, I can't really comment that much with the 1951 version, but I think having a collection like this, similar to the Floating Woods collection where you have the original and the remake, have it like this. And honestly, I'll be honest with you, a lot of these collections are very much like that, where I have the original and the remake in one collection, and you're good to go. I'll be honest, a lot of these collections that I have here are basically like that, if I'm being completely honest. And yeah, the next one is going to be exactly like that, which is the War of the Worlds collection from 1953 and 2005. So here's the funny thing with the 2005 version. Yes, I like it, but I didn't realize how popular the 2005 version was until this year, when earlier this year I was reacting to all of these best movies of the past 25 years, best movies of the century, all these lists, and War of the Worlds is one that kept popping up. And I guess I just didn't realize how massive and how popular this movie truly was. I honestly thought it was kind of underrated, if I'm being completely honest. It wasn't until I saw all these lists that I realized, oh wow, War of the Worlds 2005, that's actually a very popular movie. Great! Honestly, great. So, and I'm not gonna lie, that genuinely threw me off, because I didn't expect many people to like it. Or it's not that I didn't expect many people to like it, but I just didn't expect that many people to mention it. Better said. So I think having a collection like that would be great. And again, similar to The Thing, I haven't seen the original version. I'll be honest with you there. Again, have the original, have the remake, and just kind of go from there. I think that's the easiest ones they could do. I know we're talking about horror, but another one they could do with this is Scarface. I mean, if they already have the original one, just include the new one, the new Scarface, and have that as a release as well. I actually think that in general, they could do that with a lot of different movies, not just horror, and I think it would be pretty cool to just do something like that, where you have the original and the remake right off the bat. I think that'd be great, especially if the remake is also well established and well loved. In this case, War of the Worlds is very well loved. In fact, I don't really hear that many people talking about the 1953 version, if I'm being completely honest. If anything, that'll also help give a boost to the 1953 version. I think that would be a great collection. Again, just have your special features on special effects. I think this is one of those things where you could do a difference between visual effects, like practical visual effects from 1953 versus the special effects, CGI effects of the 2005 version. I think that'd be a pretty cool special feature, and comparing and contrasting. That's not to say that the 1953 version doesn't have, well, I mean, they wouldn't have CGI, but they had other techniques back then that were more computerized, so to speak. But I think seeing the difference in how they made those movies would be great. So I think that's something they could do as well. All right, next up, again in this remake, original remake train, we have Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1956 and 1978. Now, funny enough, this is actually one of those cases where I've seen the original and not the remake. Go figure. So, and I actually saw the original one just pretty recently in the past few days, because I got it from Kino Lorber earlier this year, so that's great. And I think that's part of the reason why they probably haven't done this, because Kino Lorber, their version of it is actually pretty decent. Not gonna lie, the stuff they have there, the special features, is actually pretty decent. But again, I think they could do a lot more with, Criterion could do a lot more with both releases, both versions of the movie. For this one, pretty basic in terms of special features. Just talk about some of the behind the scenes stuff. Kind of go from there. I mean, I think for some of these original remake combo packs I'm discussing, I don't really think they need to go that big with it, if I'm being completely honest. Yes, there's maybe one of the movies where you could go a lot more bigger with it, but in general, all you really want to see is some general commentary, some general behind-the-scenes stuff, and nothing else really past that. I also feel like it's very similar to like the Battle Looting collection, where you just have two random movies. Where like, again, you don't really need to do that much with it. You don't really need to do something special with it, because it's not like the Universal Monsters collection where I was talking about earlier, where like this is gonna be like a huge thing. This is gonna be like a real big thing that you really need to pay attention to, so to speak. And that's not to say that we can't pay attention to this either, but I feel like the love and care for like a bigger collection with like more than 3 movies, like 3, 4, 5 movies in the Universal Monster Collection, that's something that takes a lot more care for, a lot more intentionality behind it, versus something that's just the 2 movies. You know, you get your basic special features, maybe do 1 or 2 cool Criterion based documentaries or whatever behind the scenes stuff, videos for it, and kind of just go from there. So again, for some of these combo packs, I don't really think they need to go too big for it, but it would be nice. Next up, we have another situation like that where it's original and remake, and that is The Fly from 1958 and 1986. So this is one of those cases where I've actually seen both of the movies in this series. Now, I think part of the reason they haven't done this is because Arrow, I forget if it's Arrow or Shout Factory, they do have a whole Fly collection where I believe it's Goldblum's The Fly, and I think that has a little series like The Fly 2 and The Fly 3 or something like that. So I do know there is some of that probably affecting why The Fly hasn't been made into Criterion. Part of that also is because I don't feel like The Fly, the original The Fly, 1958, I don't feel like it's that well regarded. I think it's one of those things where like the original was so much better that it basically overshadows the original version. I guess to a certain degree, War of the Worlds also has that, but I also feel like the original War of the Worlds was like generally liked, and that's also based on a book on top of that, so like we kind of knew more about it, versus The Fly. I don't think The Fly, at least I'm completely mistaken, I don't think The Fly is based on a book. It also has to do with the fact, similar to even The Thing, where the special effects, the makeup in The Fly, it's just so grandiose and so much more notable that it's obviously gonna just like overshadow the original version. So I think there is also certain elements of that. I don't know, I feel like some compared to even the original War of the Worlds, compared to the original Body Snatchers, you know, compared to even the original Thing, I feel like The Fly isn't really talked about that much. It's like, it's even with The Thing. Even with The Thing, fun fact, it's actually a remake of this movie from like the 50s called Thing from Another World. Like, even people at the very least know that. I don't even hear that as a fun fact for The Fly 86 version. Like, oh, by the way, fun fact, this is actually a remake of The Fly from 1951. 58. So yeah, actually, in fact, when I bought my copy of The Fly, the Blu-ray, I thought I was buying the 1986 version. Yeah, 1986 version of The Fly, because I didn't know there was there was a remake of another movie called The Fly. So when I popped in The Fly and watched it for the first time, I'm like, this seems a lot older than I thought it would. This does not seem 80s. Where's Jeff Goldblum? Oh wait, there's an original version to this. My bad. Still a good movie, but my bad. It's kind of like that. So I feel like, especially for this movie, for this case, for the original The Fly, I think this is one of those movies that would really help bolster its popularity, make it more well-known, to be honest with you. So I think in that case, it would also very much help the original Fly, because remake The Fly doesn't really need that much help anymore. You know, it's got Jeff Goldblum, people love Jeff Goldblum, the special effects behind it, it's its own little series on top of that. Like, again, I just feel like The Fly 1958 just gets often forgotten. Again, even compared to some of the previous ones I've mentioned. Speaking of which, and I think this will be the last combo pack for a bit. Yeah, for a bit, this will be the last combo pack. Next up, we have the Little Shop of Horrors collection from 1960 and 1986. So yeah, for those who don't know, I think this is kind of similar to The Fly in this case, where, for those who don't know, Little Shop of Horrors was actually, it wasn't just a musical, there was also a movie behind it, and from 1960, black and white, which actually Jack Nicholson, that was actually like one of his first roles. Jack Nicholson as like one of the dentist patients, if I'm not mistaken. So take that for what you will. Similar to The Fly, similar to War of the Worlds, Body Snatchers, The Thing, I think the original version would very much benefit from getting a special boutique release, because the remake is just so much more popular than it. That's what it comes down to. Now, I do have 1960s Little Shop of Horrors, I think 2 or 3 times over, because of a bunch of different other horror collections, and that's kind of the thing with The Fly. No, sorry, not The Fly. That's kind of the thing with Little Shop of Horrors and kind of War of the Worlds and Thing from Another World. Those movies, the original versions of them, they're in a bunch of these like Miller Creek's like horror collection stuff. Like I for sure have them like 4 or 5 times over, and like various different horror collection packs that Miller Creek has released over the decades, to be honest with you. So maybe that has a certain element to it. I don't know, like I feel like that could be a reason why they maybe haven't released it, but I also feel like that's kind of a dumb reason why not to release it, if I'm being honest with you. Honestly, if they ever do Little Shop of Horrors, I think this is probably the one that would most likely happen to. If they ever do release Little Shop of Horrors, what they'll probably do is release the 1986 version and then have the 1960 version as a bonus feature. I feel like that's probably what will happen. Honestly, The Thing could probably happen with that too. The Thing where the 1982 version is there and then they release the 1951 as a bonus feature. They probably don't advertise as both. But for me personally, I would want them to be both like a double pack. You know, like that. Advertise both of them at the same time. So I think that's something that could happen. But even then, I don't really see Little Shop of Horrors. I could see The Thing being Criterion more than Little Shop of Horrors. Although, granted, we just got Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and I would say Pee-wee's Big Adventure is pretty similar to Little Shop of Horrors in terms of, like, granted, not genre, you know, you're talking about comedy and horror movie, but just, like, in terms of, like, the comedic tone, if that makes sense. Again, I kind of just like the idea of them doing that thing of, you know, release the original and the remake and just a double pack, or even if not, just, like, release the original and release the remake. I mean, granted, it's not horror, but they have Wages of Fear and Sorcerer as their own two individual releases, so they can also do like that. I don't know, I think it would just be very cool for them to do that in general. At number 7, we have an actual collection, so not just 2 movies, this is going to be several movies, and this is the one I was talking about. Like, I've only ever seen 1 movie in this series, but I'll explain in a bit. And this collection would have to be so yeah, this is a general giallo collection. So for those who don't know, giallo is a style of Italian horror movies that got very popular in the 60s and 70s. Suspiria is often mistaken for a giallo movie. It's not, but it often is mistaken as a giallo movie. For me, Suspiria is kind of like an entry point to giallo. So again, it's not giallo, but pursue giallo, start with Suspiria type of thing. And for this one, I basically just based it off the movies they have on the Criterion channel. Because here's the thing, horror in general, to begin with, when it comes to Criterion, is not that very well represented. And giallo seems to just in general get the very short end of the stick in general. And it's weird because they have a lot of these movies on the channel, Criterion channel, but they don't have any of these movies released on the Criterion collection. So all the movies here I basically have based off what movies they have on the Criterion channel, and I'm sure there's more than just these movies that are giallo that they have in the channel, but these are the ones that I decided to go with. And that is Blood and Black Laces from 1964, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage from 1970, the only movie here I've seen from this giallo collection, All the Colors of the Dark from 1972, Don't Torture a Duckling from 1972, Deep Red from 1975, The House with Laughing Windows 1976, Tenebrae from 1982, and Opera from 1987. So those are the movies I kind of have in this hypothetical collection. You know, they could add other giallo movies, they could maybe take out some of these giallo movies, but I think in general it would be great to represent kind of a movement in film, because they don't really do that often in Criterion. Like when they have their collections, they usually have it either like the Clip series, where it's all the works of a certain director, so they have that, or they have it like a series, so like the Before trilogy, which is still one director. I feel like they kind of need to do something more themed. The only theme thing I could think of is this monster and sci-fi 4-pack that they have, which I'm maybe out of print if I'm not mistaken. So like that's the only thing that really comes to mind right off the bat. I'm sure they have some other stuff, but for me that's the first thing that comes up right off the bat. So I think having something like this, the honest giallo, which has been such a major movement, especially in the 80s, in terms of horror cinema, that has inspired filmmakers from generations, will be great. I'll be honest, I'm not sure if they still make giallo movies now. I'm sure they do, just they're not just as popular, but I think honoring those forebears from way back when, from the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, I think that would just be great. I mean, you definitely have a lot of Dario Argento, like, right off the bat. Overall, I think it'd be great. And again, I also find it weird, and not just in regards to giallo, but I always kind of find it weird where, like, oh, you have one movie in the channel, but they're not part of the collection, or vice versa. This movie's in the collection, but it's not in the channel. Like, I've always found that also just generally weird. I think they should have a giallo collection. I think one of the major reasons they don't have a giallo collection, aside from their trepidation when it comes to horror movies, is because of the fact that other companies, other boutique labels like Arrow and Shout Factory, they have a bunch of giallo collections in their midst, in their catalog, and they're very much popular, very much well regarded. So I think that's maybe the major reason they haven't really delved that much into giallo in terms of the releases for the collection. But I think even outside of this whole collection thing, you know, I think some of them just having their own individual release would be great. Like, granted, Bird with the Crystal Plumage is the only one I've seen from the movies I mentioned here, but like, I know Tenebrae is a very popular one. Although granted, some of these, even with their individual releases, Arrow and Shout Factory, they've done their own individual releases that's also very well regarded. I know Tenebrae has that thing, Opera has that thing, so I think that one's a bit trickier, especially because like you could add whatever, you know, you just say giallo, you could add however movies you want, whatever movies you want. But I think in general, that's something they should do. Next up, we have a trilogy of films, all from the same series, and that is and that is the Night of the Living Dead trilogy. First off, they already have the original 1968 Night of the Living Dead in the collection. And I think that's great. Put in the other two, Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. I think, when it comes to zombie movies, capital zombie movies, it's the Living Dead trilogy. The original George A. Romero trilogy. And I think that's something they could do a lot of great stuff with it. Honestly, I mean, you already have one of the movies in the collection. All you have to do is literally just transfer that into the trilogy. You can add all the same special effects. You got all the same special bonus features, the little plan flipped, everything. You can just literally transfer everything else into this trilogy, and then do the same for the next two movies, for Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. For this one, I feel like a lot of the work is already done because they've already done the first movie. And I think this release would be very great. I mean, for me, I'm a huge fan of zombies. My favorite show franchise really is The Walking Dead, which is all zombies. So I think this is one of those collections that they could do a lot of great stuff with, especially since they already have one of these movies in the collection. I think it's kind of just very much easy to do this. I mean, I almost equate it to the Wes Anderson thing, where a lot of the Wes Anderson movies, I think the majority of them, aside from Isle of the Dogs and French Dispatch, the majority of them were already in the collection, and now they just transferred everything, all the other movies, the stuff from all the other movies, into this collection. I think that's basically what they should do in this regard. I mean, and in this case, you could also have a lot of documentaries and behind-the-scenes stuff in regards to George Romero and him discussing, like, what it meant in regards to creating zombies. I'm pretty sure some of this is already in the Night of the Living Dead release to begin with, but, you could have more documentaries, more commentary for Day of the Dead and Dawn of the Dead, and how he decided to evolve the idea of the Living Dead, so to speak, the Living Dead franchise, this Living Dead movie, into some of these other movies, Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. Like, what was the concept behind putting them in this shopping mall? What was the concept behind, looking at what the military was doing? And Day of the Dead, I think a lot of that could be really great, and honestly, it's something they really should do. Granted, I think now that I think about it, the one downside about this is the fact that Romero is dead, so I don't think they could really get that commentary anymore unless he already did it in the past for other releases. So if anything, you could transfer that. But like, I feel like for this collection, a lot of the work is already done. Honestly, similar to the Universal collection, a lot of the work, in some sense of the word, is already done. They just kind of need to transfer it in. The only difference between the Universal collection and this Dead collection, so to speak, is the fact that the Universal collection, you would need to transfer it from another studio, and I'm not sure how helpful they will be. I imagine they'd be decently helpful, because like, oh my gosh, our movies are going to be in the Criterion collection, and I'm sure that Universal has other movies in the Criterion collection as is, so I don't see a reason why they would deny it in this case. I mean, aside from like the fact that they have their own collections that they want to advertise, that's really it. It'd be a very similar situation, see the company, search up what company has the rights to Dawn and Day, talk to them, and just kind of go from there. I think, again, I feel a lot of the work for this collection is already kind of done, and they just kind of need to do the work to like just combine it all. Alright, next up we have a few more of these original and remake ones. Again, sorry, not sorry, but that's what I have. Next up we have the Aliens collection, and for this one I'm just going to include the first two Alien movies, Alien from 1979 and Aliens from 1986. I think the main reason they haven't done this one is because there already is the Aliens quadrilogy collection, where it has the first four Alien movies. I feel like a lot of stuff that they would need, or they would want to do, is in that quadrilogy box set, which I actually do have. So I think that's a major reason why they haven't done a collection like this, similar to the Universal collection. And for this one, the only reason I wanted to point out just the first two Aliens is because, let's be honest, Aliens 3 and 4 aren't that well regarded. Alien, the original Aliens, is probably the one that's most likely to get a Criterion release. And after that, maybe Aliens 2. And that's really why I only picked the first two movies, the Alien and Aliens, because I don't really see them going for Aliens 3 and definitely not Aliens 4. I feel like just the first two in this case would be the go-to standard for this. Again, the one trepidation I think they would have, fair enough, is the fact that there is that Alien quadrilogy box sets, and there's just also other Alien box sets, Alien collections that include like Prometheus movies in it as well. There's probably already released by some company with just the first two Alien movies on top of that. It's one that I could see a reason why they wouldn't do it, but I definitely think they should. And for this, you'd have a bunch of documentaries, behind the scenes stuff in regards to like, how was the alien created and all the logic behind it. In my last video, I also did mention Predator. For that one, I just said the first Predator. If they were to hypothetically do a Predator release and an Alien release, you could definitely have a documentary where they're discussing each other, like, hey, Alien, how was the idea of combining with Predator? And hey, Predator, how was the idea of combining with Alien? I have that as a special feature, bonus feature for both releases. But overall, I think this is one that they could do. I think even more so than Universal and even more so than the Living Dead thing. I think the major thing really holding them back in this case would be the fact that the quadrilogy collection does exist, and that is a very much well-liked collection, if I'm being honest, even more so than the Universal collection, because they've come out with a few different variations of the Universal collection. This one, the quadrilogy box set, it's one that's like one of those very well-known box sets, one of those very well-known collections that a lot of people just generally like, especially if you like sci-fi, especially if you like the Alien franchise. That's one that a lot of people really much go for. So I think that's really the main reason why they wouldn't ever release Alien or Aliens, but I think they should. Next up, we have the Shining collection. So yeah, we have The Shining from 1980 and Doctor Sleep from 2019, and I think this one will be kind of cool. I feel like this is the one where they probably most likely do, but as individual releases. If I'm being completely honest, I can see them doing this sometime in the future as individual releases. So The Shining has its own release, cool. Then Doctor Sleep gets its own release, cool. They already have some Kubrick stuff in the collection as is, so it kind of makes sense for them to do it. And then on top of that, just adding Doctor Sleep, which is, I would say, it's one of the more popular horror movies from the past 10-15 years for sure. I think that is not something to be disregarded. So I think just because of that alone, it is something they should do. I think it would be great. You could definitely have some documentaries in regards to like, oh, how was it for Mike Flanagan, you know, to one, honor Stephen Kubrick's The Shining, but at the same time also honor Stephen King and his original The Shining story, because that's the thing, that was his major struggle even back in the day. Stanley Kubrick, why did I say Stephen Kubrick? Stanley Kubrick, besides the point. But that was his major struggle back in the day when trying to develop the story, because he wanted to honor both camps. Because for those who don't know, Stephen King, he despises The Shining. He despises how that movie turned out. So much so that he even made his own, in the 90s, he made his own miniseries of The Shining that was more faithful to his story, to his book. So I think, you know, trying to figure out, a documentary on how he's trying to honor both camps would be really great. And I think they do have that in the original, in the Doctor Sleep Blu-ray that I have. I'm pretty sure that is a special feature, because I've definitely seen stuff about it. Again, this is one of those things where they just need to transfer a few stuff and it should be good. I don't know what studio would have the rights to this, to be honest with you. I'm inclined to say Universal, because I'm looking at my list and I see Universal Monsters at the top. I'm pretty sure it's not Universal. But I think this is one of those things that they could do. And again, you just need to do a lot of transfers between stuff. And that's really it. And then maybe have your own commentaries at that point with Mike Flanagan, with Stephen King on top of that. And you should be good. You and McGregor on top of that. Oh, maybe bring back Danny Floyd. That'd be pretty cool. Honestly, as a commentary, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, I think this is one they should do. It'd be fun to do. I think this is probably the one that they'd most likely do, but again, as two separate releases. And honestly, they'd probably be more likely to do The Shining than Doctor Sleep on top of that. Okay, next up, this is gonna be some very cheesy stuff right now. But next up we have the Gremlins collection. So yeah, Gremlins and Gremlins 2, the new batch. Screw it. Why not? Have something silly? Let's go for it. I mean, in my last list, I had Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So, you know, I'm not afraid to get silly. And they do have some silly movies. I mean, again, right now, they're about to release, not PewDiePie, Jesus Christ, Mr. Bean's Adventure, or whatever it's called. So, I mean, that's already as silly as it comes. They also have Eating Raoul, which is like one of the most randomest movies on their collection. So, like, they're not afraid to get silly by any stretch of the imagination. And I think it would just be funny to say, like, yes, we have Gremlins on the Criterion channel, or on the Criterion collection. We have Gremlins 2 on the Criterion collection. I think that'd be just very fun and silly and hysterical. You know, again, you could definitely have a bunch of documentaries in terms of like the puppetry for the Gremlins and all that good stuff. I think that'd be great. I feel like if anything, like realistically, I don't think they'd ever do Gremlins. I'm also the type of person who would have said, oh, they'd never do Mr. Bean's Adventures or whatever, Pee-wee's Big Adventures. I would have been under that camp and, you know, egg on my face. I think this is what they could do. If anything, they'd probably be doing Gremlins. If anything, this is what I see them doing, really. If anything, I see them doing Gremlins. And then maybe they put Gremlins 2 as a special feature. To be honest with you, that's realistic. That's really what I see them doing. If anything, that's where I really see them doing. Honestly, I think they should just do it. Have both of them there. Have fun. Go from there. I think the main reason they haven't done that, I mean, there is a Gremlins 2 pack that's been released in the past, but it's one of those things like how many people are getting that? It's, you know, it's a fun little thing. You know, it's one of those things, they could do it. They cannot do it. You know, that may be a reason why they haven't done it, but I also feel like that's kind of a dumb reason, kind of an insignificant reason. It's also one of those things where, like, compared to, like, whatever Blu-ray DVD that was released back in the day with the Gremlins 1 and 2 collection, this is one of those things that they would take their time, do all the research they need, and just produce a bunch of little great special features on top of that. You know, maybe bring back Joe Dante, but, you know, bring him back to do some commentary. I think that'd be hysterical. You know, maybe do, like, for Gremlins 2, maybe do something about Hulk Hogan and how his involvement, especially now that he recently passed away. Maybe do something in regards to Hulk Hogan and how his involvement was for Gremlins 2. I think that'd be hysterical. The reception for Gremlins, the first one, like, the reception for the original Gremlins was, like, kind of all over the place. And it's one of those things that even one of the biggest critics of Gremlins, he was like, you know what, screw it, I'll still be in Gremlins 2, just to like crap all over it all over again. I don't care if I die, I'll still crap all over it. So like, you can also do something like that. And even on top of that, Gremlins 2, Joe Dante, he did not want to do Gremlins 2 originally, because he thought Gremlins 1, the original Gremlins, is kind of like a one and done story. Like, he was basically forced to do Gremlins 2. But it was one of those things, okay, if I'm gonna do Gremlins 2, I'm gonna do it my way, I don't care, just stay it on my way, and we're good to go. And they kind of gave him free reign. I heard some stories where like, no, they kind of tried to spy on him, but he was like, screw this. Basically, screw you and screw this, and kind of still did his own thing. Having some documentaries about that, and some behind the scenes stuff about that, some commentary on that, I think that'd be great. I think it'd be fun. So why not? Have Gremlins 1 and 2 as a collection. You're good to go. Next. Alright, next up we have the Terminator collection. So yes, Terminator 1984 and Terminator 2 Judgment Day 1991. So similar to the Aliens collection that I had mentioned beforehand, one, there already is a Terminator collection out there, a Terminator quadrilogy box set, which I also have out there, where it has the first 4 Terminator movies, and even past that they have other collections with all the other, 6 or 7 Terminator movies that we have out now, with Terminator Genesis and Dark Force or whatever it's called. I think that part of the reason why they maybe haven't pursued this collection is similar to the Aliens collection, because there already are so many other collections with all the Terminator movies. Similar to Aliens, there are so many collections with the Alien movies, and there is already a fundamental collection with the first 4 movies, similar to Aliens. So honestly, this takes a very similar trajectory to that Aliens collection that I said beforehand, where it has a lot of the similarities in regards to that. Similarly, the only reason I chose the first 2 Terminator movies is because those are the 2 that are definitely the most well-respected out of the bunch. Terminator 3, yes, some people like it, but it's not that well regarded, and Terminator 4, people really don't like talking about it, and we're not even going to discuss something like Genesis or whatever the other movie was past that. Again, I think this really just comes down to the first 2 movies, and if I'm being completely honest, I feel like they'd want to do Terminator 2 as a Criterion release over Terminator 1, but I would also think it'd be kind of weird that they start off with the sequel versus the original one. So that's why I kind of just included these 2 right off the bat, because I can't think of any example in the Criterion collection where they give a release to the sequel, but not the original, not the first one, or the ones that came before it. I can't think of a single time that's ever happened. Maybe there is an example, I just don't know it. But usually they give a release to like the remake and not the original one. Like, there's a lot of examples of that, but I can't think of a single example where it's the sequel and not the first movie or the movies that came before it. So that's why I have the first 2. I think that would make sense as well. If anything, another thing I could see them do is just have the original Terminator. Another thing I could maybe see them do, and this is a big maybe if I'm being honest with you, but another thing I could maybe see them do is releasing T2, and then as a bonus feature, Terminator is there. But like, I feel like Terminator is not one you need to hide. On top of that, like, Terminator is one people would want to watch regardless. It's not like Little Shop of Horrors, for example, where like you need to hide the film that came before it, or like as a special feature, like where it's it's not that well known, but you might as well throw it in there. No, people are gonna know Terminator. You know what I mean? I think that also has something to do with it, to be honest with you. But again, I think the main reason they haven't really done this is because there's just so many collections with Terminator as is that it just seems a little bit irrelevant. But I think this is one that really should do. I think it'd be great, and people will definitely buy it. Similar to the Alien collection, I think this is one that people will buy it, hands down. Alright, next up we have another trilogy of movies, and I'll be honest, this one isn't entirely horror, if I'm being completely honest with you, but that is the Cornetto trilogy. Straight up, have Shaun of the Dead, have Hot Fuzz, and have The World's End in a collection. Now, Hot Fuzz is definitely the one here that's not horror. Shaun of the Dead definitely is horror. World's End is like sci-fi primarily, but then horror secondary. Hot Fuzz is a murder mystery. But, so I guess in that sense, it's still kind of a dark thing with murder mystery and across the board they're all comedies, so why not? I think similar to Gremlins, this would be kind of a funny collection just to have there in the Criterion collection in general. Like, oh my gosh, Shaun of the Dead is getting a Criterion release. I feel like similar to like the Shining collection that I was discussing earlier. This is one where like if they really wanted to, they could just release every single one as an individual release. Honestly, they could also do that with the Day of the Dead. The Living Dead trilogy that I was talking about. I mean, again, they already have Night Of as its own release, so just release Dawn and Day and just kind of go from there. But yeah, back to the Cornetto trilogy. However, I think in this case, Shaun of the Dead is probably the one that will most likely get a release, if I'm being completely honest, because that is the most well-regarded one out of the bunch. Hot Fuzz, a lot of people like Hot Fuzz, and World's End, I don't really hear that many people talk about World's End, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think if any of these are going to get its own release, it'll be Shaun of the Dead. But honestly, I think in general, they should just release this as a trilogy and kind of go from there. Kind of a loose trilogy, but still a trilogy regardless. I think it'll be very similar to to the Before trilogy box set that they have, I think they could do something very similar to that, where, you know, you have this trilogy of movies, you have all the special features, especially because it is the same creative team behind it with Sean Pegg and Nick Frost. Again, I could definitely see them just doing Shaun of the Dead, and I think that would be the easiest thing they would do. But I think in general, it would be great to have the Cornetto trilogy. Look, I'm sure there's also a release of the Cornetto trilogy all in one box set or somewhere out there, but I think it's that well regarded. And what I mean by that is, like, it's not one I really hear that often. It's not one of those things where, like, oh, you need to get this. It's not like, again, it's not like the Alien box set or the Terminator box set that I was talking about earlier, where, like, those are some of those collections that everybody says you need to get. Again, I'm sure there's a Cornetto trilogy box set somewhere out there. It doesn't seem like it's one that you need to get, if that makes sense. So if Criterion does this, at that point, it will be one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, you need to get this, like, yesterday. I think it'd be a fun collection. I think similar to Gremlins as well, it'd be a fun collection to have. The last two are going to be directors. So these are going to be the works of certain horror directors, primarily horror directors, that I think would be very cool to see in the collection. And I feel in these two cases, you can almost do like an Eclipse series type of situation. So yeah, the first one I have here is the Robert Eggers collection, and here you'll have The Witch from 2015, The Lighthouse from 2019, The Northman from 2022, and Nosferatu from 2024. So yeah, 75% of this collection is horror, The Northman being the one exception, but it just seems kind of weird to like exclude The Northman. It would just seem kind of weird for me to go from The Witch to The Lighthouse and Nosferatu and just like completely ignore The Northman because it's not horror. So I'm like, you know what, screw it, let me just put it on here, why not? And also, at least for me, The Northman is like the most underrated movie that he's done thus far, because again, a lot of people really love The Witch. A lot of people love The Lighthouse, you know? And Nosferatu, I think it's one of those that like, oh yeah, it's actually a really good movie. You know, I think that's one that's kind of like, that people didn't know what to think about it at first, but like, generally speaking, people really much enjoyed it, whereas I feel like The Northman has been completely ignored in his greater filmography. I also think that if you're gonna do a Robert Eggers collection, he also did a number of short films even before that, so I think you could also include a bunch of his short films from even before that, and just have a really nice Robert Eggers collection, and kind of just go from there. I think that would be a really great collection to have. I think Robert Eggers in general, he hasn't, at least not to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure there is something out there. I just feel like he hasn't really gotten a good release of any of his movies past like the basic Blu-ray. You know, the only thing I could think of is The Witch. It's in this A24 5-pack, different movies that has stuff like Hereditary and Green Room and X, and it comes from night, or whatever that movie was called. It comes at night. That's what that movie is called. Like, that's the only thing I can think of that has a special release in regards to any of these movies. You know, I'm sure some of these movies have a steelbook somewhere out there, but like, you know, again, it's one of those things like past the generic Blu-ray, I don't really feel like any of these have like a really good release. Again, maybe some steelbooks, maybe some special slip covers, but that's about it. But I think if you were to put these on Criterion, it would be great. And on top of that, you could include some of Robert Eggers' other works, other short films that he's done in the past into the collection. I think it'd be great. And then past that, you know, the general stuff of, you know, maybe some behind the scenes stuff for The Lighthouse and The Witch, Northman, Nosferatu, and kind of just go from there. Him talking about how the original Nosferatu inspired him to make that new Nosferatu, the ideas behind The Witch and how that came to be, how art really inspired his view of The Lighthouse, and The Northman, how him delving into Norse mythology, you know, all that Viking mythology, Viking history, informed The Northman and his making of The Northman. I think you have a bunch of great documentaries in regards to that, and behind the scenes stuff, commentary, whatever have you. Kind of just go from there. I think this one would be a really great one. I think this is one that they probably could do. I also feel like similar to some of the other prior collections that I've discussed, this is also one of those situations where I could also just see them doing like individual releases for each of these movies. And honestly, I think all of these movies, just even across the board in general, should be in the Criterion collection, if I'm being completely honest with you. And the last one, another director, we have the Jordan Peele collection, with all three of his movies: Get Out 2017, Us 2019, and Nope 2022. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I am not the biggest fan of Jordan Peele as a director. I think Get Out is good. I think it's a good movie. I think it's very overhyped. Daniel Kaluuya, sure, being nominated for an Oscar, it's not my favorite Oscar nomination. And that's not to say he did bad work in it, but it's not really one I would have gone for, personally, for me. But I do think that Get Out is his best movie. Conversely, I think Us is his worst movie. I am sorry, I just can't get behind the whole mind-bending logic of all the numerous plot holes behind that movie that are kind of like mind-bending, because you're telling me that you have these two worlds, and that despite the fact that this project ended like in the 80s, also have a doppelganger below, all the logic behind that doesn't make sense. You know, where did they get all the jumpsuits? Like, for those who criticize Us, have heard all the criticisms against Us, you know where I'm going with this. So for me, I actually think it's his worst movie, period. And then Nope was fine. I'll be honest, Nope was fine. Like, I like Steven Yeun, he was great, you know. Daniel Kaluuya as Old Chat, I actually think he did a better job as OJ than what was his name in Get Out? Something Washington? Yeah, I actually think he did better. I think Keke Palmer was great in Get Out. I feel not Get Out, sorry, Nope. I feel like the performances were better in Nope. On top of that, if I'm being honest with you, but I still think Get Out, just from a thematic and writing standpoint, was a lot better. It's just good. It's literally just a good movie. So why I have this here. It's one of those things where I think a lot of people would want this. Me personally, I really wouldn't want this. At least I think it'd be cool to have in the collection. It's not really something I would pick up immediately, but I feel like a lot of people, especially now, would really love this. So I mean, honestly, that's why I threw it there, to be honest with you. I also felt like I needed to have some more. I needed some more modern day stuff, if I'm being completely honest with you, and I wanted some more like people-centered stuff. So a lot of these stuff, like I've said in the past, where it's collections of movies from the same series, from the same franchises. I kind of wanted something different, and immediately I thought about Robert Eggers. So I'm like, okay, what other director could this work for? And honestly, Jordan Peele just seemed like a logical choice on top of that. Again, even though I don't like him that much as a director, it kind of just made so much sense, honestly, because some of the other horror directors, I mean, I guess you could do Wes Craven, I guess you could do something like Joe Dante, Romero. I mean, Romero, you can have that with the whole Night of the Living Dead trilogy, so you kind of have Romero there as well. I don't know, Jordan Peele just seems like one that would make a lot of sense nowadays. So that's what I have here. And again, you can have a lot of documentaries of him just discussing like each film and the logic behind each film. Him trying to explain the logic behind Us that still makes no sense, but sure, go ahead, be my guest. You know, for me, it's just something that kind of makes sense. It's one that I almost see them doing that in the future, if I'm being honest with you. Right? Again, similar to like the Cornetto trilogy, maybe they do one of these movies as an individual release, with Get Out being the most likely one in this case, the first one in the series. This kind of makes sense to me, so, and I just wanted to include it here. So yeah, that's basically it for now. That's basically it for the list. Again, you're seeing the lists I have right here with all the movies included. And yeah, that's basically it for now. If you guys have any thoughts on what other collections they can make in the future, comment all that down below. Let me know. Again, this was just a fun little video, and that's basically it for now. This is Daniel Mart, signing off.